state your names and the region that you're representing.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Dan.
And we co-lead Next Move Europe.
Tell us about what's happening in your region right now. What are the key needs or opportunities?
Yeah, I think for us the best way to describe what's happening in our region is found in Isaiah 54 verses 1 to 3, where as Isaiah starts writing that, he describes this barren woman, therefore who sadly can't have children, but to sing this song about actually how her descendants are going to dispossess nations, settle in their desolate cities. And the beginning of that journey is this picture of a tent, where it's stretching out the tent curtains to the right and to the left and strengthening its stakes and lengthening its cords. And we believe that's a picture of Europe right now. This place that feels barren, desolate at times. People have almost forgotten it. Some people maybe even have deliberately, or it was the greatest place for sending missionaries and all these different historical things. But God is birthing something new, and it's in the next generation, and it's out of a barren space. And we're seeing a greater hunger and openness for the things of God. I think ultimately there's a greater hunger and openness to faith, really. And we need to make sure, as the followers of Jesus and as the church, Big C, make sure that we are presenting the full, radical, life-changing person of Jesus, because they're going to go off and pick up other things. And I think the other dynamic is that new leaders are rising up, and those leaders, they want to lead differently. They want to lead collaboratively. They want to lead in relationship and community.
Yeah, and I think some of the needs we see is Europe has been a blessing to the world, but now we feel like when you look at it, it's very inwards. There's not many missionaries being sent to across the globe. And that's one of the needs we see is Europe is stopping thinking just about itself, because there's so much need for Christianity to be advanced, but to be a sending nation. And within the next generation it's still a very more older people led ministries. So it's passing the mic on, giving a voice to the next generation. And another thing we've seen as a need is boldness in leaders to live a radical faith and to share a radical faith. Young people are not just wanting to hear the simple things. They want you to be true and to say, this is what I believe, this is what we're seeing. So really be authentic and radical in how we're sharing Jesus with the next generation.
Tell us a story of one person whose life has been deeply changed by your work.
Yeah, the person that I think of is Gloria, who we've both had the privilege of encouraging and investing, and is actually here with us in Manila, which is really exciting. And she's a brilliant young leader that we met 6-7 years ago, as we sit here in 2025, through a Young Evangelist Academy that we helped start in the UK. It was a collaborative partnership of 8 different movements and organisations coming together to say, how do we raise up not just young people in their local churches to all be sharing their faith, but raise up those young evangelists who are going to equip the other young people. And we met her. She came on the programme when she was like 13, 14, came right through the programme. She now helps lead the programme. She's now at university, is a phenomenal young leader who is now raising up and multiplying herself, raising up hundreds of evangelists every year, inspiring them, encouraging them, and now figuring out what it is to live as an evangelist at university beyond her school and high school context and college context. And she has seen so many people come to faith, but I think her legacy is what it says in Ephesians 4, which when it talks about the fivefold gifts, and the gift of the evangelist is to equip the saints for works of service, not just do the evangelism for the church, as it seems to have been interpreted in the 20th century. And so actually her legacy is in the multiplication of the amount of evangelists that she's raised up. She's an inspiration to us.
Yeah, definitely.
What do the streets of Europe look like if there were no limitations?
I think we would love to see the organizations and churches working together more and see multiplication happening, because they are collaborating, they're working together, there is unity. Another thing is seeing the local church having more of the next generation in it, leading, doing things for Jesus. So seeing the increase of number of young people and young adults in the local church.
Yeah, I think also the fruitfulness in the next generation is we find ourselves in a very interesting socio-political space across Europe with so many changing dynamics across society. And I think the church finding a fresh voice in the midst of the changes and the challenges of different things over the past number of years, of the pandemic and all sorts of stuff, that actually as they step up, I think they've got part of the answer to understand, well, what does it actually mean to be a young person that is passionate about practical community transformation, it's passionate about seeing people's needs met, but that isn't owned by another space, that's led by the church. What is it for a young person to stand up in the political arena faithfully for Jesus? What is it in the media space, in the music space, whatever it is, that actually they are going to show the way of what it is to live for Jesus in those spaces? And I think the other thing is that these are going to be young people who are gospel advancing and know how to disciple their peers, know how to lead others, know how to go deep together in Scripture and in what it is to follow Jesus, and are really going to wrestle with the page of Scripture and say, what does it actually mean to live like Jesus? That actually not a sugar-coated or a toned-down version, but actually radically, this radical grace, this radical love, this radical outworking of power. That's another dynamic in itself. What does it actually mean when having a spirit of power, love, self-discipline in 2 Timothy? They will show us what that looks like, I think, in this next generation.
I think the dream is seeing that happening and seeing this space being created for that to happen.
Yeah.
Because if we don't create this space, if we don't give them a voice, it's on us to make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's the dream, to collaborate to see that happening in Europe.
Yeah, we don't just want to see more bums on seats in churches. We want to see more people mobilised as the church, which also leads to increased Sunday gatherings, but that mobilisation. And actually, I think church culture shifting to we don't lose people from our church who move or go to university or whatever. We launch people.
Yeah.
Like that's part
them.
of the church DNA. I think for too long the church in Europe has treated, for like any F1 fans, I think has treated Sundays as the racetrack and the rest of the week like the pit stop. And it has to be the other way around. And I think this generation want that. It's like, fuel me up on a Sunday, fuel me up in those gatherings, because the rest of the week is the racetrack. Because that's what I see in the life of Jesus.
Okay, guys, what is the next move to you guys in one sentence?
I think for me, is the deepening of the relationships that we have within the community. But I think for me personally, the biggest thing is, as a woman in leadership, not everywhere you go, you feel valued, you feel heard. And for me, being part of the Next Move community has been, as a woman in leadership, feeling I'm heard, I have a voice, I'm valued, and I'm empowered to do what God has called me to do.
We say that Next Move is a community, but what does that mean to you?
I think that means to me it's a group of friends who are going deeper together, but all around a same passion for the next generation. And I think it's that prioritization of, let's make friends before we make something together. Let's trust before we start ripping it all apart with certain questions. And it's not bad to ask questions, but just that childlike faith of trusting first, and then saying, actually, how do we pray together and unite prophetically in prayer before we create projects together?
How has being part of this community impacted what you have been busy with?
Me and Dan, we are really passionate about the next generation, but one of our areas that we say it's in common that we love is developing leaders. We love investing in young leaders, doing mentoring, and we've done it even before Next Move. It's been part of our whole life in ministry, investing in the next generation, in young leaders. But since joining Next Move, being part of the community, one of the things that we see a lot of impact is we still do that. We still love doing that, but we've been doing that and seeing more multiplication happening through collaboration. So seeing that happening and seeing more young leaders coming, giving them a voice, passing on the mic to that, it's been a great thing that it's happening.
Yeah, and being able to give them space and invite them into collaboration. We've been involved in a number of collaborative projects in the UK and then across Europe. And I think actually finding ways to elevate the younger leaders' voices, the younger people's voices within that space. Because even when leaders work together collaboratively, I sometimes find that actually it's still a bunch of people in a certain generation or a few generations still making all the decisions, when actually have we got someone sat in the room who's under 25 to go, great ideas, guys, but has very little relevance to like my generation, where we're at. And also understanding the generations like Gen Beta or whatever they're going to be called as we sit here in 2025 are going to be born next year. Gen Alpha are about to finish like secondary school in most of Europe in our context. Gen Z are turning 30 this year. You know, like this is the world and the space that we live in, and yet for some people they're still maybe caught up in the idea of, oh, what's Gen Z, and understand that. Well, the majority of Gen Z are actually adults already. And so actually, how do we understand that, and how do we invite them into a journey? And then also I think for us, the other element of community that shaped how we function, because how we spend our time is community building, doing collaboration that leads to action, and then leadership cultivation, as Marina mentioned, that actually how do we take people on a journey that begins in friendship and listening, actually starting a real conversation, not a conversation so it's like, well, we did a bit of chatting and now we'll just get on with the thing we already planned, but to truly sense together, go deeper in friendship together, and then to a point of, now we have a coalition of the willing. We've got a group of people saying we are united in prayer, in understanding what God is up to, understanding what already exists. So we're not going to replicate. We're not just going to duplicate what's happening. But actually, what are the gaps? What do we understand? And then what do we go after together? That united vision, coalition of the willing. Then into collaborative action. Okay, who's going to pick up the ABCs? And so how do we journey with people in that is birthed in community and relationship? And so I think there's so many shifts there for us in terms of how we do that collaboration, and I think also just recognizing collaboration is a bit of a buzzword right now in ministry, and so actually doing that in an authentic way rather than just saying, yeah, we collaborate, but actually with the action in mind, and not just with an idea of action, but actually land the plane and say, we're going to do this together. And that is going to lead to grassroots impact, more young people being fully devoted followers of Jesus, seeing a difference in their world, and multiplying themselves through peer-to-peer evangelism and discipleship. I think particularly our region and our environment, what Next Move is bringing is a space for the new to birth. I think that's what's really interesting right now. It's not that we as Next Move and as a community are claiming we own all new things or we are the only space new things can happen. But I think sometimes we just need to create fresh spaces for new things to emerge. We honour and recognise institutions. We flow and serve within structures of different networks and organisations, serving them. But sometimes people just need a fresh space that's based on vision and values to have a go at some stuff, or even them as a leader to begin to emerge when actually in their nation or their context, actually they don't fit within the structures or institutions. And again, it doesn't make those bad, but it just creates a space. And I think there's a fine line to walk, because actually it's really important that we honour, respect and serve the existing institutions and structures while empowering people to create, have a go, innovate, collaborate together for the sake of the next generation, and how these things run alongside. And we're seeing a real beautiful synergy in Europe right now. The leaders of some of the main institutions, denominations, just saying, we want to collaborate, we want to do something for the sake of the next generation. We don't just want this individual to come and do this job for us, but like, can the community come and serve this? Can the community come and help us facilitate this? And so I think that's really exciting right now, is it's that space for the new, but not just that top line of then us like claiming everything that's new that's happening in Europe or in our context comes out of Next Move for the sake of the next generation, but understand that we're creating almost like building a new greenhouse for some stuff to germinate in.
Yeah, and I think it's, for us, we see it like joining Next Move, and the Next Move community has been such an exciting journey with the focus on the next generation. Because in Europe for a long time people would believe like the church is dying, there's less and less young people in church. And we feel like we are playing a part in such a crucial time in Europe right now. We're seeing church emerging within the next generation, and more of the next generation coming to church, coming to faith in miraculous ways.
Yeah.
Like in the UK now, because we're based in the UK, there's so many stories that we would only reading books, and we're seeing that happen right in front of us, and seeing that, and our prayer has been for that to happen across Europe as well. So we feel like God is up to something very special in our region. We feel like that right now, and for us to be focused on the next generation, it just feels a huge privilege to be part of this community, to be able to say, how can we work together to continue seeing the fruits that we're seeing in the next generation?
And I think the other dynamic in that is as well is, particularly in places like the UK and other parts of Western Europe, there is a very isolationist mentality. They don't talk to people outside their nation. And particularly in Western Europe, it's very resourced, high level of saturation of Christian ministries, which is amazing. But then you go into other parts, sub-regions of Europe, and it's a very different story. And yet, sometimes the places that are best resourced don't listen outside of their space. And actually, I believe the traditional big boys nations that have had a lot of the resource, that have had a lot of the ministries coming out of them in Western Europe, actually, because that's where we live, but we're listening across Europe, is just this almost a breaking down of what seems to be a barrier of listening outside of context, of sensing together. And understanding that actually, you know, the Nordics and Scandinavians, they went secular first. So understanding what it is to reach a secular generation, they're the leaders in that. You look to the East, they understand what it is to build church for the last 30 years, reach the next generation out of post-communism, out of a context that eradicated Christianity and made it illegal. Then you go to the South and you more traditional nations that would still see themselves as Christian in a broader sense, and understanding what it is for next generation to emerge in that space. And then you go to the other parts of like Central, and the Czech Republic is the most atheistic nation in the whole world. And so understanding what it is to reach the next generation in that space, it's time to listen and learn. And we genuinely believe that the answer is in the room, and the room is called Europe. The challenges that one nation face in reaching and empowering the next generation, the answer is in another nation, and vice versa. And if we can help these leaders to listen to each other and journey together, and then actually even that in itself will accelerate what they're doing and lead to a greater fruitfulness through beginning in listening and sensing.